Hello everyone, I hope that you're very well. I hope that you had a lovely Christmas day and that you're enjoying these last few days of 2023. New Year is right around the corner. I am so excited for 2024 reading. This happens every year, I get to like October, November and I get a little bit reading slumpy, and then I get to December and I'm like, I want to finish all these books for the end of the year, and I do, and then I get so excited for the New Year's goals. But of course, we can't do that without first discussing the best books of 2023. I have already told you about my favourite non-fiction books of the year, and here are my favourite fiction books I read this year. So they are specifically books I read this year, not necessarily books that came out this year. Some of them came out a long time ago, but I only read them for the first time this year, so they're on this list. There are 10 of them, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 10. But they're not in any particular order. It felt cruel to rank them. Which is ironic, because I rank my books every single month. So this is just a selection of 10 books, specifically the best 10 fiction books I read this year. So first up is one I actually finished very recently, and that is Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah. Now I sometimes feel, because when I'm thinking about the best books of the year, I'm not just thinking about a book I really enjoyed in the moment. I'm looking for a book that stuck with the fly. I think I killed the fly. I don't know where it is now. It's probably concussed, if not dead. When I think about the best books of the year, I'm not just looking for books that I enjoyed in the moment. You know, they have to have stuck with me. They have to have left a lasting impression. And sometimes I feel like that favours books at the end of the year because I've only just read them. I don't know if they will actually stick with me. But sometimes you read a book and you do know. And this is one of those books. So the main character is a young black gay man called Harley, and it's set, the fly is back. It's set in the sort of mid-noughties, and he is really struggling with his mental health. And he has a new flatmate, Muddy, and they strike up an unlikely friendship. Muddy loves birdwatching. He loves the small joys in life. And the two boys really bring out the best in each other. It was so tender and poignant and just, you know, it was so well crafted. Every single sentence was clearly just like so mulled over and perfected. And I was just, it hurt, but in a good way. It was like prodding a bruise, this book, you know? And the ending, it just felt so sort of fulfilling. And you know, the character arcs were so strong without ever being like, here's a story about getting better. It was so true to life with so much like just nuance and small joys and small joys. Sorry, I thought the fly was on me then. This video is going to be me versus the fly. Okay, so this next one is an author that I used to love. That sounds really harsh. Okay, it's Different for Boys by Patrick Ness, and I was a huge Patrick Ness fan back in the day. I queued up for signings, one of the few authors, probably the only author I've ever been to like a Q&A and signing for. Yeah, I was obsessed with his books. I loved Chaos Walking, I loved More Than This, and you know, I was getting older and I kind of sort of outgrew some of his books, which is fine and normal and natural. But then Different for Boys came up, his new release on NetGalley, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to dive back in, I'm going to see what I've been missing out on. And boy was I missing out. It's quite a short book, and it's about a group of boys in an all-boys school in the UK, and it uses censorship brilliantly. This is a thing that sticks with me from this book, is that certain words and phrases are blacked out as if they were censored on like a World War II telegram or something. And at first it's used for comedic effect. You know, it'd be like, what the, and then a little black box. Sometimes you're like, I couldn't even guess what's under there. And towards the end of the book, it's used for sort of emotional impact. That the the character is able to hide things, the narrator is able to hide things from us, the reader, and it's such a fun twist and such a good way to approach a book. This next one I feel like I haven't shut up about since I read it, and that's because it was amazing. And that's Catfish Rolling by Clara Kumagai, and this book, I think it's a debut. It's based on Japanese folklore, and so in Japanese folklore there's a tale that there is a catfish that is pinned underneath the islands of Japan, and when it tries to wriggle free, that's when they have earthquakes and other natural disasters. And in this particular world, then the earthquakes have caused not just rifts in literally the earth, but also in time. And there are some zones where time goes faster and some where time goes slower. And the main character, her father he works in these time zones, and he goes missing, so she goes to rescue him. So it's a blend of science fiction and fantasy and mythology, but really it's about grief and family and whatever the word is for overcoming grief. It was just such an impressive book. Like, I was expecting a sort of fun adventure, and then I had my heart torn to shreds, which is the best kind of book. Let's be real, that's the best kind of book. It's so good. It's just so good. It's so good. You should all read it. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. So the next one I'm going to talk about is a YA one, and that is Stateless by Elizabeth Vine. This is a historical fiction about a race across Europe in the last year or so before the Second World War, and it was intended to unite the countries in Europe, and by getting a group of young people and getting them to fly across Europe in planes. And the main character, Stella, she has a secret, and her secret is that she is stateless. She is an asylum seeker. She does not belong to any one country. And it was a fun adventure. There was a mystery aspect, but also we got to see the way these young people's lives were being affected by what was happening politically, and also highlighting lots of themes that are very, very relevant today when it comes to European peace and war and asylum and refugees worldwide, not just in Europe. It was an adventure story with a lot more to it under the surface, which I very much appreciated. This next one was completely unexpected for me, partly because I thought it would be a fantasy book. It's The Clockwork Girl by Anna Mazzola, and the cover looks like a fantasy book, but it is in fact sort of historical fiction, but it's definitely whimsical and fantastical, but I would not call it fantasy. There was no magic. It was all set in the real world, more steampunk at a push than fantasy. And it's set during and get my King Louis number right. Well, Madame de Pompadour was a character. So 18th century France, pre-revolution, I think. My French history is not great. And people have been going missing, and I need to know why. And I kind of don't really want to say anymore, because not knowing anything was the best way to go into it. But yes, historical fiction, very creepy. It was really, really creepy, which I loved. I loved that. A bit of steampunk influence. Definitely, if you are a fan of whimsical fantasy, you would enjoy this book, even though it's not fantasy. That's the kind of bit of genre it's in. Yes, I don't want to say any more. I don't want to ruin it. It was great. The next one, I can't believe I only just read it this year, but I did, and I loved it, and it's A Secret History by Donna Tartt. So it's Dark Academia. It is the OG, perhaps, of Dark Academia. It's set in a New England college and is about a group of friends who get slightly too caught up in ancient Greek traditions and mythologies. And, well, it's a mystery told in reverse, in that we are told at the start that someone has died, and then it goes back to when they were alive, and builds up to the moment they died, and we got to see it all play out. It was just so good. It was so good. Just believe the hype. It was one of those books. It's about terrible people doing terrible things, but we still love it. We still love it. Now, I was just thinking, I can't find my copy of this next book anywhere, and then I realised, I don't know if you can see. No, I tried to move the frame, but I don't think you can see. There's a stack of books on the bedside table, just like there. And it's at the very bottom of that stack. So I'm just going to leave it there. And that is North Ranger by, and let me get the names right, by Ray Terciero and Bray Indigo. It's based on Northanger Abbey. It's a Southern Gothic graphic novel about queer farmhands. Of course I loved it. Of course I did. So instead of Catherine, who is obsessed with Gothic novels, we have Cade, who is obsessed with horror films. And he is reluctantly sent to be a farmhand for the summer, where he meets the farmhand's son, Henry, and they strike up a friendship. And there are a lot of mysteries at this farm, and Cade tends to overthink things, tends to escalate things. So it all gets slightly out of hand. What I loved about this as a retelling of a classic is not only did it have the beats of the story, but the way that it updated all of the sort of themes and the features of the characters was just brilliantly done. And it tied into the queer themes really well as well. It was just also perfectly balanced and beautifully illustrated, brilliantly written. Is it my favourite Jane Austen retelling? It's up there. It's up there. Next up, and I'm obsessed with this one, Kit and Basy by Tess Carletta. This was so cosy. It was so lovely. It reminded me a bit of House in the Cerulean Sea. It was like that, but even cozier. So Basy is an immortal being. He and his mother are the only immortals, and she decides she is going to go, and he's going to be left on his own. And he doesn't know what to do anymore because he used to have his mother and now he doesn't. So he sells their house to Kit, and he is not very happy about this, even though he's the one that sold it. And so it's proper grumpy sunshine. He keeps coming around to be like, you're doing the gardening wrong. And Kit's like, okay, let's do it together then. And it was just so sweet. And the emotional impact of this one, there is a record of me reading this because I read it on reading sprints. It is immortalised on video. It's me doing a little happy dance when I got to the end and there was a big reveal, and I loved it, and it was great. Just so cosy and sweet. We are nearly at the end. We've got 2 more to talk about. So, The Low Road by Catherine Quami. This is historical fiction, as you can tell from the cover, and it's about 2 women in early 19th century England. Yes, that is correct. I always get my centuries mixed up. So, 2 women, early 19th century England, and they're based on real people, or sort of their starting points are real people stories. And it's about them trying to live and trying to thrive and trying to survive in the hardships that are early Victorian England. It was brutal at times, very, very moving, very tragic at times, but really balanced out all those different layers and emotions just expertly. Really, really well done. It also had great queer representation, and especially for the time, obviously, that people's relationship with their identity and their sexuality would be very different in the early 19th century from now. And so I thought that was sort of done really well, of depicting what it would have been like to be a queer woman in the 1800s. And the final book on my list of best books I read in 2023 is Happy Head by Josh Silver. I loved this book so much. It's dystopian, it's giving Hunger Games, but also, I don't know what the other comparisons I came up with were, but it was just, it was brilliant. So it starts off with setting a sort of government mandated programme to improve the well-being of teenagers at risk, and they get sent off to this camp, to Camp Happyhead, where of course not everything is as it seems. So we had all of that sort of dystopian sort of adventure aspect to it. It also explored mental health and did that in a really moving way, very powerful way, and it explored sexuality and queerness and how they all intersect with each other, and it was brilliant. The audiobook which I listened to was great, so good. And I can't wait for the sequel next year. It's coming out in May, and I'm so excited because it did end on a cliffhanger. And that's it. In no particular order at all, those were my top 10 books, top 10 fiction books I read in 2023. Let me know what the best books you read this year were. Let me know if you have any recommendations for me for next year. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and if you would like to see more videos from me in 2024, then make sure to subscribe. Have a happy new year, and I'll see you next year. Ta-ra for now.